It's been a while since I've done this, but we're back, and I have taken a look at the 4 big games that were released over this past month. And there's a gem among them, but for the most part, a lot of these games have been disappointing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through the games, and we'll talk about them in alphabetical order. I'll mention them in alphabetical order. So Assassin's Creed Origins, Call of Duty World War II, Star Wars Battlefront II, and Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus. So those are our games. Those are the ones we're going to be talking about today, and I actually want to address them in the order of worst to best. And actually, addressing them in that way is kind of difficult because it's difficult to tell which is the worst, but it's not difficult to tell which is the best. But this is my assessment of the worst to best games of the last month. So fall 2017, the big AAA game releases. I think at the bottom of the list, I would have to put Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus. That's got to go at the bottom. Game has a couple of problems. Graphics, they're okay. They're not awful. They're not great. I don't think they're quite up to the 2017 standard. 2 things hold this game back really badly, however. Number 1 is the repetitive gameplay. Every mission basically is horde mode Nazis. Doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's all very linear. Let's just move step by step and just kill lots of Nazis who have to be shot multiple times. Ultimately, we'll kill a bunch of Nazis, and then we'll reach the end of our quest, and it will end. We'll have a cutscene, and then we'll do the same mission. And it really is, in many senses, the same mission over and over and over and over again. The gameplay, it starts off, kind of neat, and you're sort of excited about it, and it looks okay. You're inside the submarine, and all sorts of stuff is happening. You're confined to a wheelchair. It's a little challenging. And then, well, it just gets into this niche, and it never gets out of it. And the gameplay is just the same mission over and over again. Very linear, very horde mode-ish. And it's just, after a while, not a lot of fun. Here's the thing that makes it even less fun, though. There is a sense of sadism that pervades this game in a very unpleasant way. There's a lot of head chopping off. There's lots of Nazis sort of glorifying in their own evil. And it just gets depressing, and it just gets you down, and it's not a fun game. It just the weight of the sadism, just the darkness of the game really could use some lightening up. It could use some lighter moments. The bad guys are all caricatures, and I think that's the problem. And they've made them such caricatures that there's no way that you can do that other than to sort of glory in this sort of sadism, in this type of darkness, this sheer glee in committing mayhem and torturing and killing people. And it's interesting when you look at the Nazis, the way that they actually were. Yes, there were sadists, and sadists always found their place in a police state like Nazism, but for the most part, these people were very clinical about what they were doing. Even people had moral misgivings about it, but thought it was necessary to ensure the future of the Aryan race. That's, making the Aryan omelet required of Jewish eggs to be broken. Whether that was weird medical experimentation, and even people like Mengele always told themselves, it seems, that they were doing this for the good of the German army, the actual German soldier. And that while it was unfortunate and awful the things that they were having to do, well, war demands harsh sacrifices and harsh measures. But the thing is, they generally, some did, but for the most part, they didn't glory in it. They took a very workmanlike attitude towards the things that they had to do. And even at places like Auschwitz, where millions of people were killed, they kept up the pretense that they were leading them into showers for delousing when they were gassing 2,000 people at a time. So the caricature of Nazis that Wolfenstein II puts forth really detracts from your joy in the game, and actually detracts from your joy in killing the Nazis as well. It's not something that, well, it's really hard to explain. It's like it's extermination. It's like they're really vermin who need to be exterminated. And there's some challenge in it because some of the levels get difficult. But for the most part, you feel like you're doing something that has to be done. I don't think you want a game that makes you feel like you have to do it. And that's kind of the feeling that I got off of Wolfenstein. So I didn't like that. I didn't like the darkness of it. The tone of it was just too much. So much so that it becomes unpleasantly caricaturish. So I'm not really happy with Wolfenstein. I didn't even finish the game on the single player, and I usually do that because I'm a completionist, but it just got to be a little too much. I mean, I'm sure I'll go back to it and do it. But there's another reason why I didn't finish the game. It's because I got a spoiler out of it, which is at the very end, there's no boss fight. Basically, the game runs like this. Cutscene, kill Nazis, horde mode, kill Nazis, cutscene, kill Nazis, horde mode, cutscene, kill Nazis, the end. So you're spending the entire game trying to set up this revolution in the United States against the Nazis, and you never get the revolution. It's all set up and no payoff. So that has to be the worst of the 4 games that we got this past fall. The number 2 and 3 places are really difficult to pick from. But I think if I had to pick, I would pick Star Wars Battlefront II as the 3rd place game. Disappointing in that, yes, it has a single player mission and it takes about 4 hours to complete it. And it's not a very believable single player mission, not a very well written one. You're playing a commander on the Imperial side who's a special forces trooper. So apparently you've been at the pointy end of the stick for your entire career. And about a third of the way through the single player campaign, you realize, oh my gosh, we must be the bad guys. Well, look, if you've been in the Imperial military for 12 years, 15 years, and you don't realize you're the bad guys and that you're doing awful stuff, then you're a dolt. So it just doesn't have believability. The gameplay is fine. The graphics on it are fine. But they really gave us the bare minimum of a single player. I really expected a little bit more. I mean, at least keep me entertained for 10 or 12 hours, could you? But no, 4 hours and it's over, and then you're into the multiplayer. But of course, Battlefront is all about multiplayer. That's what Battlefront 1 was about, the original. And Battlefront 2 is about that too. They've made some changes though. We're not going to get into the loot box system because they've crippled the loot box system now. I'm sure they're going to turn it back on. Battlefront 2 has some serious loot box problems. If they do turn them back on and go back to game progression being made mandatory via random loot boxes, which means that you can't progress in a set class, you can't just play what you want to play, you're going to be stuck with whatever you get in a loot box. That's going to be horrible. They have tried to play that. They have changed progression now so that it is sort of based on the classes that you play, and that's a good thing. But they've also done some other things that have changed the game. One of the original criticisms, and it wasn't a criticism I agreed with, by the way, for the original game, was that it had too much auto aim on it. Too much aim assist made it a lot easier for lesser skilled players to play and compete against higher skilled players. And I think that for a Star Wars game, which has an audience that goes beyond just your basic Call of Duty audience, the people who want to get in there and excel and be the best at the player versus player combat. I think you had a different audience for Star Wars, and I think it's a much broader audience, and an audience that probably isn't all of that well versed in first-person PvP shooters, and they're probably not very good at it. Look, quite frankly, I'm not very good at it either. I think the most kills I've ever gotten in a match is like 10 or 12. I did much better at Battlefront, the original, than I do at Battlefront, because what they've done is they've really toned down the aim assist. So basically there's just almost none at all, or at least none that I can tell whenever I'm playing in multiplayer mode. So you really have to be good at what you're doing to actually get kills. You have to be right on target. You can't just pull in the zoom and have it zoom right into your target and be right there in the kill zone so that you can bump them off. That was something you could do in Battlefront. You can't do it much in Battlefront II, so it's very much not a zoom-in game. It's very much a twitch response game in many cases, especially because some of the maps are a little small and they're a little claustrophobic. You don't have a lot of open spaces. You don't have a lot of good sight lines. You are, after all, inside a starship or a battle station for many of the maps. So twitch response really does count. So it's not as easy to play as Battlefront does, so I think that may turn off some of the more casual fans. The other problem is that if you do like to be top dog in every match that you're in, it's not as rewarding, because what they've done is they've leveled out the rewards that you receive. So it doesn't matter how many points you score, the points really take you through your progression. So the points that you score in a match do enable you to level up. So the more points, of course, the faster you level up. But your ability to buy, to go through new weapons and new equipment in the classes basically is based on crafting parts, which you buy with credits, and everybody basically gets the same amount of credits per match. So you can be horrible and get no kills and 10 deaths, and basically you get about the same number of credits as somebody who got 40 kills and 1 death. There may be 20, maybe 30 credits different. So you play a match, you get 230 credits. The top, and you're the worst player, the best player gets 250 credits. So you all tend to level up at about the same rate. So it doesn't pay off for the skilled players, or you might say it puts the unskilled players with higher levels just as fast. And I'm not sure that that's the way you want the leveling system to work. If you're not good, you kind of have to grind at things until you learn how to do it. Maybe you can't learn how to do it. Maybe you'll never be good. But ultimately, you'll rank up. Whereas the people who do play a lot and who are there all the time and who score high, they probably want to be able to access new equipment, new weapons, new crafting parts for their weapons faster, and they're kind of held back by this system. So it's a weird system that they've put into place. And the reason that the system is so weird for crafting parts is because so much of the original game was based on loot boxes, and there was so much pushback from the community, including from me in my last video on the subject for Battlefront, that they sort of had to go back and rejigger everything in the last month to try to fix the perceived problems, and ultimately they shut down the store completely. And you know that as soon as the pre-orders are done, and as soon as they're a couple of months into this, they're going to reopen that store. We're going to be back to loot boxes. It's not going to go away. So be prepared for that. The other thing about Battlefront that did not impress me as much as it does others is the graphics. And don't get me wrong, they're good, but there's something off about them. The second you see any of the maps, you know it's computer generated. And it took me a while to figure out why. And I actually went back and looked at the graphics on Battlefront 1, and then I popped over in Assassin's Creed and looked at the graphics there, which do look more photorealistic. And it seems to me that what the problem is with Battlefront 2's graphics is not that they aren't detailed, they are extraordinarily detailed. And that, I think, is the problem. They are so detailed. There is so much contrast in the images. You can see so much that it looks fake. It looks artificial. It kind of goes into the uncanny valley. It's not real, and you can tell it's not real, even though it's super detailed. There's something about the reflections. There's something about the level of contrast and the clarity, the sharpness of the images that make them look artificial. Our eyes tend not to see with that much sharpness. And so when we see something on TV that is so crystal clear and so perfect, it looks artificial. And Battlefront 2's graphics look artificial to me, which is not to say that they aren't fantastically well done, and there aren't a lot of moving parts in those graphics, like leaves that blow across the trail while you're running through the forest at Endor. There's just an amazing amount of stuff that they've put in there But when you look at it, you just take one glance and you know, okay, this is computer generated. It's not photorealistic. It's a monumental achievement for how much you're able to cram in there and how realistic the animation is. But the actual quality of it is so good, it gives it an artificial cast that doesn't fool you into thinking you're looking at a movie. It doesn't fool you into thinking you're looking at something real. And that detracts a little bit from the game as well. And of course, like I said, the loot box problem is still hovering out there. I assume that they're going to bring that back, and that will destroy the game. Basing progression on random loot boxes is basically a gambling pay-to-win system. I'm dead set against that. That brings us to Call of Duty World War II in our second place spot. Not a horrible game. Very good graphics. The facial animations are astoundingly well done. They're still having a little problem with hair. That's the one thing in computer animation they still haven't been able to fix yet, and that's hair. So we still have a hair problem, but other than that, the facial animations are just superb. The action is good. It's very varied in the different types of activities that you do, the different types of missions that you have. So that's good. The story is okay. It could be better. Basically, it just takes place in about the 3 months after the invasion. You start off invading Omaha Beach, which, by the way, I thought was a little bit of a letdown as far as a level goes. It was too short. In the real world, when those guys hit Omaha Beach, they weren't on the beach for 30 seconds blowing up Bangalore torpedoes and heading inland. Those guys were stuck on the beach from about 6 a.m. till about 2 in the afternoon when they finally had enough people to begin moving inland. It was horrible. It was a slaughterhouse. My grandfather was there. He talked to me about it. And I don't think there's really any way in a video game that you can sort of approach that level of carnage, what my grandfather described to me, which was very much like what you see in the first 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. This game, it was much more muted, much more easy. It didn't seem as much of a life or death thing. They try to give you that sense, but the level was just over too fast. You didn't spend enough time on the beach, and you spent all of your time sort of cleaning out the bunkers behind the beach. There's a couple of quick time events in the game that I don't like, where you hit X and now use your left stick and press it and move it over here, and you have to do it real quick or the Nazi stabs you. Okay, fine. There weren't too many of them. They didn't get oppressive, so they popped up here and there. You can deal with that. The thing that really kills the gameplay in Call of Duty World War II, and that takes you right out of the realism, is number one, if you can just rush to the set point that kicks off the next segment of the mission, it doesn't matter whether your guys are getting killed by the Germans, doesn't matter whether the Germans are kicking your ass. As long as you get to the set point, boom, the Germans instantly retreat and you start the next segment of the mission. So all you really have to do whenever you're playing is sort of charge ahead to the next set point. And then that segment of the mission is over, whether you automatically accomplish the objectives just by reaching enough progress to move forward enough to hit the set point. So once you know how to do that, you can fool the game. The other problem with it, though, is that it is every Call of Duty game that they've released since Call of Duty World at War. There hasn't been anything new or anything innovative in a Call of Duty game since then. Every single game, all the Advanced Warfare games, Black Ops, the Infinite Warfare where you were running around fighting on spaceships with modded up AK-47s that shoot lasers. Lasers. It's the same game. It's just a reskin. All of the mechanics are exactly the same. All of the AI is exactly the same. The type of missions that you play are exactly the same. If you've played Call of Duty since Call of Duty World at War, you've played this game. You had different weapons. You wore little different uniforms. So it was visually different, but the gameplay was exactly the same. And it's starting to feel a little old and a little bit dated. So whenever you can just rush the Germans and hit the set point that kicks off the next mission segment, and all the Germans just run away, despite the fact there's 50 of them and one of you, assuming that you survive to get to the set point. Well, that sort of detracts from the realism, and then of course the same old gameplay, the same type of missions. It's very repetitive as well. So, okay, not very happy with the single player mission, although single player mission substantially longer than the single player mission in Battlefront II, so it does give you a real cohesive single player mission or single player campaign that actually means something, and it takes you with the 1st Infantry Division from Omaha Beach through the Hurtgen Forest, and then it makes an odd jump to the very end of World War II to rescue one of your comrades. Not a bad game. It is a Call of Duty game, so it's as good as Call of Duty always is, or as bad as Call of Duty always is, whatever your opinion is. So I guess I could say it is you will like it if Call of Duty is the sort of thing you like. The multiplayer, of course, the maps seem a little more claustrophobic. They've tried to do this thing with a headquarters and tried to make it a little more exciting and give you all these different classes and people from different countries and blah, blah, blah. Yes, you can play, in the German army, you can be a black woman German soldier in the multiplayer. They've also removed all of the Nazi regalia from the multiplayer. Obviously, that's necessary simply to maintain legal compliance in many companies, or many countries, Germany included, since you can't have swastikas and that sort of thing displayed in Germany. The multiplayer is whatever Call of Duty multiplayer always is. It's the exact same thing. It has pretty much the same modes. They've kind of changed the names a bit, but it's the same thing. And it is sort of the same thing for me of, just death after death after death. One kill, death, death, death. One kill, death, death, death. I'm not all that great at the PvP stuff, so I tend not to play those very often. And not playing them, I tend not to get much better at them. However, it is the same old Call of Duty. And it actually starts off with some decent weapons, even at your base classes. So you at least have a chance to survive. But again, some of the maps are a little claustrophobic. And so the PvP sessions are more of a test of your reflexes than they are of your combat infantryman skill. But then again, that's what Call of Duty always has been. So if you like that thing that Call of Duty does, then you'll like this because they do that thing that Call of Duty always does. That leads us to our last game, which is Assassin's Creed Origins. It's not perfect. There are a couple of drawbacks. The story is okay. It's interesting in that it gives you the title implies, the origin of the Brotherhood, the Assassin's Brotherhood, and the origin of the Order, or what becomes the Illuminati or whatever in all of the other games. You do get to run around in ancient Egypt, and it's amazing to think, and it's actually quite clear when you play the game. If you look at when the Old Kingdom actually ruled Egypt, and then look at the time of Julius Caesar, and then count the time between Julius Caesar and today, it was actually a longer stretch of time between when ancient Egypt first started building pyramids and what have you, and Julius Caesar than the time from Julius Caesar to today. So even in 37 BC or 47 BC, I think that's the year, 47 BC, which is the year it's set. Even in 47 BC, those pyramids and those temples in the middle of the desert, they were 2,000 years old at that point. So ancient Egypt to what we consider the ancient Egyptians was even ancienter. So that point is brought home well in the game. So the Old Kingdom was actually really quite far long ago, over 4,000 years. And so it's interesting, the perspective from someone in 47 BC calling stuff old. To us, it's all old, but to them, there was stuff thousands of years older when they were running around in Egypt. They did a great job, I think, of some historical accuracy in trying to rebuild what a city would have looked like in the ancient world, what life was like in the ancient world, sort of the ever-presence of a multiplicity of gods and superstitions. And it's just a well-done game. The graphics on it are outstanding. Everything in this game does look photorealistic. There's rarely a scene, unless you're intended to see a computer-generated thing, which, by the way, you are. But other than the computer-generated things that you run across in-game, it's just about as photorealistic as it gets. The rendering of ancient Egypt and the Nile Delta is beautiful, and running around in there is really great. The satellite navigation, or GPS, or whatever you want to call it, for your horse actually works when you tell it to go to an objective. By golly, it goes to the objective. So it's the first time, I think, in any game where the GPS actually works more or less the way that you want it to. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it works way better than anything I've seen so far. The gameplay and mechanics of it are pretty good. I guess the one drawback of it in terms of the actual fighting mechanics are that you have about 4 different classes of maybe 5 that you go up against, and so that gets a little bit repetitive. So a lot of the combat after you're about halfway into the game tends to become the same. Once you hit level 40, which I've hit level 40 and I finished the campaign. I'm actually 89 hours into the game, and even though I finished the campaign, I still have half of the map to explore. But aside of that, once you hit level 40, well, you're pretty much at God level, and you can keep increasing your strength from level 40, where all of your enemies just go to max level 40. So ultimately, it becomes easier as you go along and get stronger. You ultimately just become a god. I just finished going through a Roman fortress that had about an entire platoon of guys in there, and I just walked through and ultimately killed the entire platoon, either by poisoning or by direct assassination, stabbing them in the neck, and just walked out with all the treasure. So once you hit level 40, the challenge decreases. Although I'm not sure that the challenge and the hand-to-hand melee combat is really the centerpiece of this game, because this game has a huge open-world map. So when you start off in Assassin's Creed, you start off in this little desert town called Siwa, which is where your character originates, and then ultimately you get to explore all of the Nile Delta and then even the desert beyond. Now, they did cheat a little bit. It has a huge open world map, but about a third of it, perhaps even more than a third, of the entire southwest portion of the map is basically all desert, and there is nothing there. You can ride through it, and there are a couple of things in each one. There's a little constellation that you can align, and if you align all of the constellations in all of the regions in the game, you have a chance to get a very special reward. But I'm not going to spoil it for you. If you would like it, play it. Exploration really is kind of the key to this game. There are just a whole bushel of side missions that you can go on. There are even sort of ad hoc side missions where other players who you may know have gotten killed in the game. Well, it marks their spot, and you get to go see their body and then avenge them by taking out the NPCs that killed them. They're usually killed by 2 or 3 NPCs, and you get 250 XP by going out and taking out those killers and confirming the kills. So there's a lot to do. It's visually stunning. The recreation of both cities and villages in the ancient world appears, as far as I can tell, to be historically and architecturally consistent with what we know about the ancient world. So it really is not a great game, but it is a really good game. And as I said, I'm 89 hours into it, because it gives you a timer that tells you how long you've played, so I know. And 89 hours for $60 is pretty good. Didn't buy any of the extras. They do have a store. You can actually go buy legendary weapons or legendary outfits or whatnot. You can pay them real money to do that. However, while they are slightly better, and I mean very slightly better than rare or common swords or shields, they're not hugely better, and they don't give you a huge advantage whenever you're playing in the melee combat. Most of what you can get inside the store is upgradable, but you can only upgrade it to your current level, so you can't make yourself a god before you hit level 40. And it's attractive, and it's all cosmetic, because ultimately your level determines how powerful your weapons are, and they may be powerful weapons for your level. But, I started off, because I did the pre-order, I got a legendary outfit and legendary weapons. And I thought, well, that's great. And the nice thing about the legendary weapons, unlike other weapons, is that they can all be upgraded to your current level. But it costs a lot of credits in the game, 3,000 at least, for each upgrade. And so if you have one sword, one spear, one shield, and one set of dual swords, and a bow, okay, that's 5 items, and that's 15,000 items per upgrade per level. So what you end up doing is upgrading them to your current level and then not upgrading them for 4 or 5 levels, because it takes some time, not a huge amount of time, and not a very grindy amount of time, to gain the credits that you need, the drachma, the in-game currency is called, to get the drachma that you need to build the upgrade. But it's not hugely onerous, and it's not hugely grindy, so you can upgrade them, but it is costly. It does take that $3,000, so you have to play a couple of missions, and you don't want to upgrade every single level, because that would be $3,000 per level. And so when you find yourself at a level 23 with a level 17 sword and a level 19 shield, well, you're not really all that much. You're not really more powerful than the opponents that you're fighting, who are level 23s, maybe even level 24s, because every time you go to a new region of the map, the level of the NPCs in that region get higher. I was about a level 20-something, and I stumbled into a fort that's at the very edge of one of the regions, and it's a region where everything is level 37 through 40. And I went bebopping up to the fort, and I sent my eagle up to look at the fort to do some recon. And instead of seeing what level all of the NPCs were, all I saw were red shields with a big yellow skull in them, which told me that there was no possible way I was going to take down anybody in that fort. So if you do stumble into the wrong area, and they're not locked out, you can go into any area at any time. They're sort of fogged out on the map, but as soon as you enter the area, they get unfogged. So you can stumble into one of these areas that are level 15, that are for level 40, level 37 through 40, and you will quickly get your ass kicked in that level. But once you get level 40, then of course you can go anywhere on the map, and nobody really offers you that much trouble. But like I said, the joy in this game is actually exploring all these different regions of the maps, finding these cities, doing these little side missions, going on all these little treasure hunts. There is a load to do that will keep you busy for 100 or more hours just in the single player campaign playing it through. So of the 4 games, I guess we'd have to say that Assassin's Creed, not a great game, but a good game, is the AAA game winner for fall 2017. Anyway, that is all that I have for this particular stream, so I guess it's time for us to go ahead and move out to, to close the stream down. And I turned my music up, and I had the wrong music playing. And I put the wrong music on again. Wow. Well, I guess we'll go out with easy listening music, and we'll just calmly and slowly fade out. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll be back soon with another one. Of course, I said that a month and a half ago, and it's been 6 weeks since I had a stream. Hopefully, I'll be back sooner than that. Anyway, have a great holidays, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.